The passport was supposed to be my ticket to freedom. I'd been planning this trip to Ireland for 3 years, saving every spare dollar from my part-time job at the library, researching genealogy sites late into the night, mapping out the villages where my grandmother was born. At 53, I'd never traveled anywhere that required a passport. My ex-husband had always said international travel was frivolous spending, and after the divorce I'd been too busy rebuilding my life to think about adventures. But this trip? This was different. This was mine. I'd booked the flight 6 months ago, using money I'd squirreled away from selling my mother's jewelry after she passed. The guilt of that had eaten at me for weeks, but Mom always said she wanted her things to bring me joy, not gather dust. What could bring more joy than finally seeing the rolling green hills she'd described in her stories? The passport arrived on a Tuesday in March, crisp and official in its navy blue cover. I held it like a talisman, running my fingers over the gold lettering. Stella Elizabeth Hayes. Even my name looked more adventurous in those bold letters. I was in the kitchen that evening, making dinner and mentally packing my suitcase for the 100th time, when Derek came through the front door with that particular energy that meant he wanted something. At 28, my son had perfected the art of casual manipulation. The way he'd lean against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, wearing that boyish smile that used to melt my heart when he was 7, and had broken something valuable. "Hey, Mom." He kissed my cheek, the gesture automatic and empty. "Smells good in here. Just spaghetti and meatballs." I stirred the sauce, not looking at him. Over the years, I'd learned to read his moods in the space between his words. Tonight, he was building up to something big. "So, Brianna and I have been talking." He grabbed a beer from my refrigerator without asking. Derek had been married to Brianna for 2 years, but they still lived in the apartment above my garage, a temporary arrangement that had stretched into permanence through a series of job losses, bad timing, and vague promises to get their own place, soon. About? Her mom wants to take us on a cruise. Family bonding thing, you know? Caribbean, 2 weeks, all expenses paid. He twisted the cap off his beer, the metal clattering onto my counter. "Leaves next Monday." I turned to face him, wooden spoon still in my hand. "That's wonderful, honey. You two deserve a vacation." "Yeah, well, there's a small problem." His smile flickered. "I can't find my passport. I know I had it somewhere, but with all the moving around." He shrugged, as if his disorganization was charming rather than infuriating. "Can you get it expedited?" "That's the thing. There's not enough time." But then Brianna had this brilliant idea. Derek's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm he usually reserved for get-rich-quick schemes. "You're not leaving for Ireland until next month, right? So I could use yours, and you could apply for a replacement. By the time you travel, it'll all be sorted out." The wooden spoon slipped from my fingers, clattering against the stovetop. "Derek, passports aren't transferable. They have photos, personal information." I know, but hear me out." He moved closer, his voice taking on that cajoling tone he'd used as a child when he wanted extra dessert. "Mine expired 2 years ago, remember? And when I got it renewed, we kind of looked similar in the photos. Same dark hair, same general build. Border security barely glances at those things anymore." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for some sign that he was joking. But Derek's expression remained earnest, expectant. He genuinely believed this was reasonable. "That's fraud," I said quietly. "That's a federal crime. Come on, Mom. Don't be so dramatic. It's a technicality. Besides, what are the chances anyone would even notice? And if they did, I'd just explain the mix-up. No harm, no foul." The sauce began to bubble behind me, spattering the stovetop with red drops that looked uncomfortably like blood. I turned off the heat, my hands shaking slightly. "Derek, I've been planning this trip for 3 years. I've already paid for everything, and you can still go. Just a month later than planned. The travel agent can change your dates, right? It's not like you have a job to get back to or anything." The casual dismissal of my life hit like a physical blow. Not like you have a job to get back to. As if my work at the library, the children's reading programs I coordinated, the literacy classes I taught, as if none of it mattered because it didn't pay enough to make me worthy of consideration. "I do have a job," I said, my voice carefully controlled, "and I have vacation time approved for those specific dates. I can't just—" "Mom." Derek set down his beer and reached for my hands, his touch gentle but manipulative. "Look, I get it. You're excited about this trip, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me and Brianna. Her mother is finally accepting me as part of the family, and this cruise could change everything for us. You know how important that is." I pulled my hands away. "And my trip isn't important?" "Of course it is. But you're not depending on this for your future. This isn't just about a vacation for me. It's about my marriage, my relationship with my in-laws. You want me to be happy, don't you?" There it was, the weapon he'd been wielding against me since he was 16 years old, refined and sharpened over the years until it could slice through any argument I might raise. "Don't you want me to be happy?" How many times had I heard those words? When he'd needed money for car payments he couldn't afford, when he'd moved back home after college, then again after his first apartment, then after the job that wasn't the right fit, when he'd asked me to co-sign loans, cover his credit card payments, let him and Brianna live rent-free while they got on their feet. "Don't you want me to be happy?" And I always did. God help me. I always wanted Derek to be happy, even when it meant my own happiness got pushed aside, forgotten, relegated to someday and when things settle down. But this time felt different. This time, he wasn't just asking for money or a temporary favor. He was asking me to give up something that belonged entirely to me, something I'd earned and planned and dreamed about. He was asking me to make myself smaller so he could expand into the space I'd occupied. "What does Brianna think about this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the way Derek's eyes flickered toward the stairs leading to their apartment. "She thinks you're amazing for even considering it. She knows how hard it must be to change your plans, but she also knows you love me enough to want what's best for our future." The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost admired it. He'd managed to frame my potential refusal as selfishness, my hesitation as a lack of love. If I said no, I wasn't just denying him a vacation. I was sabotaging his marriage, destroying his relationship with his in-laws, proving that I didn't truly want his happiness. "I need to think about it," I said finally. Derek's smile widened. "That's all I'm asking. Just think about it. And Mom? Thanks for even considering it. I know this is a big ask, but it means everything to me that you'd put my happiness first. That's what makes you such an incredible mother." He kissed my cheek again, grabbed his beer, and headed toward the stairs. At the doorway, he paused and turned back. "Oh, and don't worry about dinner tonight. Brianna's making us something upstairs. We figured we'd give you some space to think things through." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in my kitchen with the smell of cooling pasta sauce and the weight of his expectations pressing down on my shoulders like a stone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the passport on my counter, thinking about the woman in the photograph, Stella Elizabeth Hayes, with her carefully styled gray hair and hopeful smile. She looked like someone ready for adventure, someone who'd finally decided to put herself first. I wondered what she would think of Derek's request. I wondered if she would be strong enough to say no. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that grew cold in my hands, staring at my passport and thinking about patterns. Derek had always been a beautiful child, the kind of kid strangers stopped to compliment in grocery stores. Dark curls, bright eyes, a smile that could charm his way out of any trouble. Maybe that was where it started, this expectation that the world would bend to accommodate him simply because he asked nicely. Or maybe it was my fault. Maybe I'd made him this way by always saying yes, always smoothing his path, always choosing his comfort over my own boundaries. The memories came flooding back as I sat there in the dark. Derek, at 16, asking for a car because everyone else has one. Derek, at 18, sobbing in my living room because he'd been kicked out of his dorm for partying. Could he move back home, just until he figured things out? Derek, at 22, fresh out of college with a useless degree and no job prospects, asking if I could help with his student loans until he found work. Each time, I'd said yes, Each time, I'd told myself it was temporary, that I was helping him become independent. Each time, I'd been wrong. But this felt different. This wasn't about money or temporary housing. This was about taking something that belonged to me, something I'd worked for and planned for, and treating it like it was his by right. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I needed time to think, space to figure out what I was going to say to Derek. But by 10 o'clock, I could hear voices from the apartment upstairs. Derek's deep rumble, Brianna's higher-pitched responses, and a third voice I didn't recognize. I was in my bedroom, folding laundry, when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Derek appeared in my doorway, flanked by Brianna and a woman I'd never seen before, tall, blonde, with the kind of expensive highlights that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Mom, this is Brianna's mother, Patricia." Derek's voice was carefully cheerful. "She wanted to meet you before we all head out on the cruise." Patricia extended a manicured hand, her smile perfect and empty. "Stella, I've heard so much about you. Derek tells me you're practically family, always so generous, always putting others first." I shook her hand, noting the way her eyes swept over my modest bedroom, taking inventory of my secondhand furniture and discount store bedding. Her expression remained polite, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "It's nice to meet you," I said carefully. "Patricia was just telling us about the cruise," Brianna chimed in. She was 26, pretty in a conventional way, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money. "The ship has 5 restaurants, a spa, a rock-climbing wall. It's going to be incredible." "It sounds wonderful," I said, though something in their collective energy made me uneasy. They were too excited, too eager, like children about to put on a show. "The best part," Patricia said, settling herself on my bed without invitation, "is that it's adults only. No children, no distractions, just quality family time." She paused, her smile sharpening. "Well, family and those who are practically family. Derek's told me how you've been like a second mother to him since the divorce." The phrasing stung. Not his mother, a second mother, a substitute, a stand-in for the real thing. "He's my son," I said quietly. "Of course he is. And what a wonderful son he is. So thoughtful, so considerate of others' needs." Patricia's tone remained sweet, but her words felt like tiny knives. "He was just explaining how flexible you are with your travel plans, how understanding you are when family needs come first." I looked at Derek, who was studying his shoes with sudden fascination. "We haven't finished discussing the passport situation." "Oh, but there's nothing to discuss," Patricia laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Derek explained everything. "You're going to let him borrow your passport for the cruise, and you'll get a replacement for your little Ireland trip. It's so simple." "My little Ireland trip," I repeated. "Well, yes. I mean, it's sweet that you want to play tourist at your age, but let's be honest. You can visit Ireland anytime. This cruise is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The 3 of us, bonding as a family." Patricia's eyes glittered with something that might have been malice. "Plus, someone needs to stay here and take care of things. Derek mentioned you have a cat?" "Derek doesn't have a cat," I said slowly. "Oh, but he's getting one." Brianna bounced slightly on her toes. "We found the most adorable kitten at the shelter, pure white with these amazing blue eyes. We were going to ask if you'd pet sit while we're gone anyway." The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. They'd already made their plans. They'd already decided I would give up my passport, cancel my trip, and spend 2 weeks caring for a pet I'd never agreed to. They'd walked into my bedroom not to ask for a favor, but to inform me of my role in their lives. "I see," I said. "I knew you'd understand." Derek finally looked up, his expression relieved. "You always do. And honestly, Mom, you're so much better at the domestic stuff than we are. Cooking, cleaning, taking care of things. It's like you were born for it." Patricia nodded enthusiastically. "Derek's told me how you've been managing the household since his father left, how you've kept everything running smoothly, made sure everyone's needs are met. It's so admirable, really, finding your purpose in service to others." Service to others. The phrase hung in the air like a bad smell. "When do you leave?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning." Brianna clapped her hands together. The flight's at 8, so we'll need to be at the airport by 6. Derek's already packed, and I just need to grab a few last-minute things. And the passport? Derek reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small manila envelope. I actually went ahead and got yours from your purse. Hope you don't mind. I wanted to make sure it was somewhere safe. I stared at the envelope in his hands. My passport, my freedom, my dreams, reduced to a prop in his performance of casual entitlement. He'd taken it without asking, without even the pretense of waiting for my permission. You went through my purse, just to get the passport. I didn't look at anything else. Derek's tone suggested I was being unreasonable for objecting. Come on, Mom. It's not like you keep state secrets in there. Patricia laughed again. Oh, Stella, you're so cute when you're protective of your little things. But really, it's just a passport. It's not like it has sentimental value or anything. I looked at the three of them standing in my bedroom. Derek with his boyish charm and practiced manipulation. Brianna with her entitled expectations. Patricia with her barely concealed contempt. They were waiting for me to smile, to congratulate them on their cleverness, to play my assigned role as the selfless mother who lived to serve. I need to think about this, I said. Derek's smile faltered slightly. Mom, there's nothing to think about. We leave tomorrow. I need the passport tonight so I can pack it with the other documents. I said I need to think about it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Patricia's smile became fixed, artificial. Brianna shifted uncomfortably. Derek's jaw tightened in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of his father. Look, Derek said, his voice taking on an edge I'd rarely heard before. I don't want to be harsh here, but let's be realistic. You're 53 years old, living alone in a house that's too big for you, working part-time at a library. This Ireland thing, it's a nice dream, but it's not exactly urgent, is it? You've got all the time in the world to travel. Unlike us, Brianna added. We're young. We're building our lives together. These opportunities don't come along often for people our age. Patricia nodded sagely. Stella, dear, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but sometimes the greatest gift we can give is stepping aside when we're not needed, letting the younger generation take center stage. The words hit me like physical blows. Too old, not needed, stepping aside. I think you should all leave now, I said quietly. Derek blinked, as if he'd misheard me. What? I said I think you should leave. I need time to think, and I can't do that with you standing in my bedroom telling me how unimportant my life is. Mom, that's not what we're saying. Get out. The three of them exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Patricia's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Of course, she said smoothly. We'll give you some space. But Derek, honey, maybe you should keep that passport with you, just so it doesn't get misplaced. Derek hesitated, looking between me and the envelope in his hands. For a moment, I thought he might do the right thing, might hand it back and apologize for his presumption. Instead, he slipped it into his jacket pocket. We'll talk later, Mom, he said. When you've had time to calm down. Calm down. As if my anger was irrational, my boundaries unreasonable. They filed out of my bedroom, their footsteps heavy on the stairs. I heard the door to their apartment slam, followed by muffled voices, Derek's low and urgent, Patricia's sharp with irritation. I sat on my bed, staring at the space where they'd stood, feeling something shift inside me like tectonic plates moving beneath the Earth's surface. For 28 years, I'd been the accommodating mother, the understanding ex-wife, the selfless woman who put everyone else's needs before her own. I'd been the backup plan, the safety net, the person who cleaned up messes and asked for nothing in return. But Derek had made a mistake tonight. He'd shown me exactly what he thought of me, exactly how much my dreams and desires mattered in his calculations. And Patricia. Oh, Patricia had been even more honest in her contempt. She'd looked at me and seen exactly what Derek saw, a woman whose life was so empty, so devoid of real purpose, that she existed solely to serve others. I walked to my dresser and opened the top drawer, pulling out the folder where I kept important documents, bank statements, insurance papers, the deed to my house. Everything that proved I existed, that I mattered, that I was more than just Derek's convenient mother. At the bottom of the folder was a business card that I'd kept for 3 years, since the day my divorce was finalized. A real estate agent who'd told me I was sitting on a gold mine, that my house in this gentrifying neighborhood was worth 3 times what I'd paid for it. I'd never called her. The house was Derek's safety net, his backup plan. If he lost his job, if his marriage failed, if his schemes collapsed, he could always come home to Mom. But maybe it was time to ask myself a different question. What did I want? I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the card. "Hello, this is Stella Hayes," I said when she answered. "I think I'm ready to sell my house." The real estate agent, Linda Morrison, arrived at my house at 7:30 the next morning with a briefcase full of comparables and a smile that meant business. She was younger than me, maybe 45, with the kind of polished efficiency that came from years of turning other people's life changes into profit. "Stella, I'm so glad you finally called," she said, stepping into my foyer and immediately beginning her assessment. "This neighborhood has exploded in value since we last spoke. You're looking at a minimum of $450, possibly $500 if we price it right. $500,000. The number hit me like a physical force. When I'd bought this house 20 years ago, using settlement money from my mother's medical malpractice lawsuit, I'd paid $93,000. It had seemed like a fortune then. "How quickly could it sell?" I asked. Linda's eyes sharpened with interest. "In this market? With the right staging and photography? 2 weeks, maybe 3? Are you looking to move quickly?" "Yes." "Any particular reason? Job relocation? Downsizing? Family situation?" I looked up at the ceiling, where I could hear Derek and Brianna moving around, probably making final preparations for their theft of my dreams. "Family situation." Linda followed my gaze and nodded knowingly. "Adult children?" "Something like that." She spent the next hour walking through my house, taking notes, snapping photos with her phone. I watched her catalog my life with professional efficiency. The kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals for Derek. The living room where he'd sprawled on my couch through 2 failed job searches. The garage apartment where he now lived rent-free with his wife. "The apartment above the garage is a huge selling point," Linda said, scribbling in her notebook. "Income potential, or perfect for extended family. Very popular with buyers these days." "It's currently occupied," I said. "Month-to-month lease?" "No lease at all." Linda paused in her note-taking. "Family?" "My son and daughter-in-law." "I see." Her tone became carefully neutral. "Will that complicate the sale process?" "Not at all," I said, and I meant it. "They'll be gone soon." At 8:15, I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. Derek's voice carried through the walls, animated and excited. They were leaving for the airport, for their stolen vacation, using my passport and my sacrifice to fund their happiness. I watched from my bedroom window as they loaded suitcases into Patricia's BMW. Derek wore a new shirt I'd never seen before, probably bought with money he didn't have, for a trip he hadn't earned. Brianna carried a designer purse that cost more than my monthly car payment. Patricia stood beside her car like a queen surveying her domain, her expression satisfied. Derek looked up at my window and waved, his smile brilliant and unconcerned. He'd gotten what he wanted, as always. He probably assumed my silence meant consent, that I'd accepted my role as the family doormat once again. I didn't wave back. After they left, I called the passport office and reported mine stolen. The representative was sympathetic and efficient, explaining the process for emergency replacement, the fees involved, the timeline. I could have a new passport within 2 weeks if I paid the expedited processing fee. "I'm sorry this happened to you," she said. "Identity theft is unfortunately common these days." "Yes," I agreed. "It happens more often than you'd think." While I filled out the forms for my new passport, Linda worked on the listing for my house. She was a woman who understood the power of presentation, of telling a story that would make buyers fall in love with a property. "I'm thinking we emphasize the income potential of the garage apartment," she said, typing rapidly on her laptop. 2-bedroom, 1 bath, separate entrance, perfect for rental income or aging parents. The main house has such character: original hardwood floors, updated kitchen, mature landscaping. "When can we list it?" I can have the photographer here this afternoon, assuming you're ready. The staging consultant could come tomorrow morning, make some recommendations for maximizing appeal. No staging, I said. Listed as is. Linda looked up from her laptop. Stella, I have to advise against that. Staging can increase your sale price by 10 to 15%. It's worth the investment. I don't want to wait. Listed exactly as it is right now. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Your house, your choice. But I have to ask, are you sure about this? Selling a family home is a big decision. You might want to take some time to think it through. I've had 28 years to think it through, I said. I'm sure. By noon, the photographer had captured every angle of my house, inside and out. By 2 o'clock, Linda had the listing uploaded to every major real estate website. By 4 o'clock, we had 3 showing requests. I spent the afternoon researching something I'd never imagined I'd need to know: tenant rights and eviction procedures. In my state, even tenants without formal leases had certain protections. But the process was straightforward if you followed the proper legal steps. Derek and Brianna weren't tenants, of course. They were family. But family relationships, I was learning, could be as binding as any contract, and just as easily terminated when the terms were violated. At 6 o'clock, my phone rang. Derek's name appeared on the screen, along with a photo from his college graduation, young, hopeful, full of promise. I'd been so proud of him that day. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 6:30, then 7, then 7:15. Finally, he left a message. Mom, it's me. We're at the airport in Miami, about to board the ship. I just wanted to call and say thank you for being so understanding about the passport thing. I know it wasn't easy for you to change your plans, but it means the world to me that you put family first. You're the best mom in the world, and I love you. I'll call you from the ship tomorrow, okay? Take care of yourself. The casual assumption in his voice that I'd simply accepted his theft, that I was even now arranging my life around his convenience, made something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. I deleted the message without saving it. The next morning brought the first serious buyer, a young couple with a pre-approval letter and a toddler who immediately began exploring my backyard. They loved everything about the house, but they had questions about the garage apartment. Is it currently occupied? The husband asked. Not for much longer, I said. Would the tenants be willing to stay on? We'd love to have rental income to help with the mortgage. Linda and I exchanged glances. The current occupants will be vacating, I said firmly. The apartment will be empty at closing. They made an offer that afternoon, $460,000. Cash, 30-day closing. I accepted immediately. Don't you want to negotiate? Linda asked. We could probably get them up to 480. No, I said. I want this done quickly. That evening, I drove to the county courthouse and filed the necessary paperwork for formal eviction proceedings. Derek and Brianna had 30 days to vacate the premises, starting from the date of service. Since they were currently on their stolen vacation, the clock wouldn't start ticking until they returned. I paid extra for a professional process server, someone who would make sure the eviction notice was delivered properly and legally. I wanted no mistakes, no loopholes they could exploit. While I was at the courthouse, I also stopped by the clerk's office and changed my emergency contact information. For 28 years, Derek had been listed as my next of kin on every form, every document, every medical record. If something happened to me, he would have been the one to make decisions about my care, my property, my final wishes. Not anymore. I listed my sister Claire, who lived in Oregon and hadn't spoken to Derek since he'd borrowed $500 from her 3 years ago and never paid it back. Claire understood boundaries. Claire wouldn't enable his irresponsibility or excuse his selfishness. On Wednesday, Derek called again. This time I answered. Mom, how are you? We're having the most incredible time. The ship is like a floating city, and Patricia's been showing us all the best restaurants and activities. You would love it here. I'm sure I would, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Are you okay? You sound different. I'm fine. How's the passport working out for you? Oh, that. Yeah, no problems at all. You were right to worry about the photos, but honestly, border security barely looked. It was so easy. He laughed, the sound carefree and oblivious. I can't believe I was so stressed about it. I'm glad it worked out. So what have you been up to? Taking care of the house, I hope? And don't forget about the kitten. Brianna's really excited to introduce you to her when we get back. I looked out my window at the sold sign Linda had installed that morning. The house would be empty in 30 days. The garage apartment would be vacant. Derek's safety net would be gone. Sold to strangers who would turn his living space into rental income. I've been making some changes, I said. Good for you. Change is healthy at your age. Oh, I have to go. They're calling for dinner at the captain's table. Patricia knows someone who knows someone. You know how it is. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Love you, Mom. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by packing boxes I'd started filling that afternoon. My dishes, my books, my carefully collected memories of a life I'd lived in service to others. Tomorrow, I would start looking for a new place to live. Maybe a condo. Maybe a different city entirely. Somewhere Derek couldn't find me so easily. Couldn't show up with his charming smile and his latest crisis. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Eviction notice served. Occupants not present. Documents left with neighbor as per legal requirements. Johnson Process Service. I smiled, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. The pure, clean satisfaction of taking control of my own life. Derek and Brianna would return from their stolen vacation to find their world completely changed. No more free housing, no more enabling mother, no more safety net to catch them when their irresponsibility inevitably led to consequences. They wanted to treat me like a servant, like a convenience to be used and discarded. Fine. But servants could quit, and conveniences could be withdrawn. The best part was, they'd done it to themselves. Every cruel word, every casual dismissal, every moment of taking me for granted had brought them to this point. I wasn't punishing them. I was simply stepping aside, just as Patricia had suggested. They'd wanted me to know my place. Now they were about to learn theirs. The house sold faster than even Linda had predicted. By Friday, we had a backup offer, then a third. By Monday, the buyers had completed their inspection and waived all contingencies. The closing was scheduled for exactly 28 days from the date of Derek's theft, a symmetry that felt like cosmic justice. I spent those days methodically dismantling the life I'd built around my son's convenience. 28 years of accumulation, sorted into 3 categories: keep, donate, discard. It was remarkable how little actually mattered when you stripped away sentiment and obligation. Derek's childhood bedroom became a staging area for Goodwill donations. His Little League trophies, his high school yearbooks, the participation ribbons I'd saved from every mediocre achievement, all of it went into boxes marked for strangers. If he'd wanted these memories preserved, he should have taken them when he moved out. But Derek had always assumed I would be the keeper of his past, the curator of his nostalgia. Not anymore. The hardest part wasn't the emotional weight of packing. It was the phone calls. Derek contacted me every day from the cruise, his voice bright with vacation happiness, completely oblivious to the demolition happening at home. The food here is incredible, Mom. You'd love the buffet. They have this chocolate fountain that's like 3 feet tall. And Brianna's mom knows absolutely everyone. We had dinner with a couple who owns hotels in Hawaii. Can you imagine? I could imagine. I could imagine him networking with Patricia's friends, building connections through borrowed authority and stolen opportunity. I could imagine him explaining his absence from work as family emergency travel, painting himself as the devoted son who'd sacrificed his own vacation to help his poor, confused mother with her passport crisis. That sounds wonderful, I said, wrapping my mother's china in newspaper. The china would go to Claire. She'd always admired it. And unlike Derek, she'd actually use it instead of storing it in a garage while living off someone else's generosity. Oh, and Mom? The kitten is waiting for us at the shelter. Brianna's already picked out all the supplies. Food, toys, a really nice cat tree. She figured you'd want to set everything up before we get back, you know? Make the apartment feel homey for our new baby. Our new baby. Not his pet, not his responsibility, our communal obligation, with me as the designated caretaker. About that, I said, taping up a box labeled Claire, China. There's been a change of plans. What kind of change? I could hear music and laughter in the background, the sound of people enjoying themselves without a care in the world. Soon, that carefree happiness would be just a memory. You'll understand when you get home, I said. How much longer is the cruise? We dock Sunday morning. I was thinking we'd drive back Monday, get home around dinner time. Will you make that meatloaf thing I like, with the mashed potatoes? It'll be nice to have a home-cooked meal after all this rich cruise food. Of course he expected me to cook for him. Of course he assumed I'd be waiting at home like a faithful dog, ready to serve and smile and pretend his theft had been a favor. I'll see what I can do, I said. Saturday morning, I met with my new landlord, a property management company that specialized in furnished corporate housing. The one-bedroom apartment was clean, modern, and completely anonymous. It came with everything I needed and nothing I didn't want. No memories, no obligations, no space for anyone to move in temporarily. The lease was for 6 months, with an option to extend. By then, I'd know if I wanted to stay in the same city or start completely fresh somewhere else. The Ireland trip was still happening. I'd rescheduled it for August, giving myself time to obtain a new passport and plan a longer stay. Maybe I'd spend a month there, maybe 3. I had 460,000 reasons to take my time. Saturday afternoon, I drove Derek's belongings to a storage unit across town. Everything from his room, his closets, his accumulated possessions from 28 years of using my house as his personal warehouse. The storage company would bill him directly starting in 30 days. After that, if he didn't pay, they'd auction off his belongings to cover the debt. I'd included a note in the storage unit, taped to a box of his old textbooks. Derek, your belongings are here because the house has been sold. The storage fee is $89 per month. The eviction notice is taped to the apartment door. You have 28 days from your return to find new housing. I will not be available for questions, explanations, or assistance. Stella. No, love, Mom. No, I'm sorry it came to this. Just the facts, delivered with the same emotional distance he'd shown when discussing my Little Ireland trip. Sunday evening, I was in my new apartment, eating takeout Thai food and reading a travel guidebook about County Cork, when my phone rang. Derek's number. I let it go to voicemail. He called 6 more times in the next hour. I ignored them all. Finally, he texted, Mom, something's wrong with our apartment. There's some kind of legal notice on the door and I can't get it off. Call me back, please. I turned off my phone and ran a bath. The new apartment had an excellent bathtub, deep and wide, with jets that made the water swirl around me like a warm embrace. I'd never had a jetted tub before. Derek's bathroom renovations had always taken priority over my comfort. Monday morning, I turned my phone back on to find 17 missed calls and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. Mom, this eviction notice has to be fake. Call me. The house is for sale? What's going on? Mrs. Peterson next door said some guy was looking for us last week. She gave him the eviction papers. This is insane. Where are you? Your phone is going straight to voicemail. I called the library and they said you took a leave of absence. What the hell is happening? Mom, if this is about the passport thing, I'm sorry, okay? We can work this out. Brianna is crying. Her mother is asking questions I can't answer. Please call me back. The last message had arrived at 2:47 a.m. I'm driving home. We'll figure this out together. I made coffee in my new kitchen and considered my options. I could continue the silent treatment, let Derek piece together the destruction on his own. Or I could answer his calls and explain exactly why his world was collapsing. The second option held more appeal. He deserved to understand the consequences of his choices. He deserved to hear, in clear and simple terms, what it cost to treat your mother like an unpaid servant. At 9 o'clock, I called him back. Mom, Jesus Christ, where have you been? I've been calling you for 2 days. I've been busy, I said. Moving. Moving? Moving where? What's happening with the house? I sold it. The new owners take possession in 3 weeks. Silence. Then, you sold the house. Our house. My house, I corrected. My name on the deed. My mortgage payments. My property taxes. My house. But, but where are we supposed to live? That's not my problem. More silence. I could hear Brianna in the background, her voice high and panicked. Patricia was there too, demanding explanations Derek couldn't provide. Mom? I don't understand. If this is about the passport, this isn't about the passport, Derek. This is about 30 years of you treating me like your personal assistant instead of your mother. This is about you taking my dreams and calling them unimportant. This is about you inviting strangers into my bedroom to explain why my life doesn't matter. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. You stole my passport, dismissed my travel plans as a little trip, and informed me that my purpose in life was to stay home cleaning and cooking while you lived your dreams on my sacrifice. I didn't steal anything. I borrowed it. And you always said family comes first. You're right, I said. Family does come first. That's why I'm putting myself first for the first time in my adult life. Where are you? His voice was getting desperate. We need to talk about this face to face. We need to work this out. No, we don't. There's nothing to work out. You have 25 days to find somewhere else to live. After that, your belongings will be in storage unit 447 on Riverside Drive. The monthly fee is $89. Mom, you can't do this. We don't have anywhere to go. We don't have money for deposits and first month's rent. And the passport thing? I could get in serious trouble if anyone finds out. Yes, I said calmly. You could. So you're just going to let me get arrested? Your own son? You made your choices, Derek. You chose to steal my passport. You chose to commit fraud. You chose to treat me like hired help instead of family. Those were your decisions, and now you get to live with the consequences. I could hear him crying now, actually crying, probably for the first time since he was a child, but his tears didn't move me the way they once would have. They sounded hollow, performative, the tears of someone who'd finally discovered that actions have consequences. Please, he whispered. I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I know I messed up, but you're my mom. You can't just abandon me. I'm not abandoning you, I said. I'm treating you exactly the way you treated me, like someone whose problems aren't my responsibility. What about Brianna? She didn't do anything wrong. Brianna stood in my bedroom and told me I was good for nothing but domestic service. Brianna helped plan the theft of my passport. Brianna assumed I'd care for a pet I never agreed to own. She made her choices too. Her mother is going crazy. She's threatening to cut us off financially if we don't fix this mess. Then you'd better start looking for jobs, I said. Real jobs, not the kind of work you can quit when it gets inconvenient. Mom, please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything to make this right. I'll pay you back. I'll get a job. I'll never ask for anything again. Just please don't do this. I looked out the window of my new apartment, at a view that belonged entirely to me. No garage apartment, no freeloading son, no entitled daughter-in-law, just space and possibility and the radical freedom of being responsible only for myself. Derek, I said, for 28 years, every time you needed something, you called me. Every time you made a mistake, I fixed it. Every time you got in trouble, I bailed you out. Do you know what you taught me? What? You taught me that I'm very good at solving problems when I put my mind to it. The difference is, now I'm solving my own problems instead of yours. I hung up before he could respond, then blocked his number, Brianna's number, and Patricia's number from my phone. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. 6 months later, I was sitting in a cafe in Dingle, Ireland, watching the Atlantic waves crash against the harbor walls, when I saw Derek's face on my laptop screen. The Facebook post had been shared to a group called Colorado Housing Crisis Support, and the photo showed him holding a cardboard sign that read, "Homeless family needs help." Brianna stood beside him, her designer purse replaced with a worn backpack, her perfectly styled hair now limp and unwashed. The caption read, "My son and daughter-in-law lost their housing due to family issues. Any leads on affordable rentals would be appreciated." The person who shared it had added her own commentary. "This is heartbreaking. Such a young couple struggling because of selfish family members who put money over blood. Praying for them to find stability." I closed the laptop and ordered another coffee. It had taken exactly 23 days for Derek's world to completely collapse. I knew this because Linda had kept me updated with an efficiency that bordered on gleeful. The eviction had proceeded exactly as planned. Derek and Brianna had tried everything: camping in the apartment after the locks were changed, calling the police to report a misunderstanding, even hiring a lawyer who'd taken their retainer and then explained that they had no legal leg to stand on. The passport situation had been particularly devastating. When Derek tried to return to the United States using my stolen document, Homeland Security had detained him for 6 hours. The investigation revealed that I'd reported the passport stolen before his departure, creating a paper trail that made his fraud impossible to deny. He'd been released with a federal citation and a court date, facing potential charges that could include up to 10 years in prison. Patricia had distanced herself immediately, of course. According to Linda's neighbor network intelligence gathering, she'd publicly blamed Derek for deceiving her about the passport situation and had banned him from future family events. Brianna, caught between her husband's crimes and her mother's social reputation, had suffered a complete breakdown that required hospitalization. They'd moved from crisis to crisis with the panicked inefficiency of people who'd never actually had to solve their own problems. First, a cheap motel paid for with credit cards. Then a week on Patricia's couch before that arrangement exploded. Then Brianna's childhood friend's basement, until Derek's legal troubles made them unwelcome guests. Finally, their car. Then shelters. Then the streets. What struck me most about Derek's social media begging wasn't the desperation. It was the complete absence of accountability. Even homeless and facing federal charges, he couldn't bring himself to admit that his choices had consequences. It was still family issues, and selfish relatives, and misunderstandings. Still everyone's fault but his own. I'd followed their downward spiral through a carefully curated network of social media connections. Mutual friends who didn't know I was watching, local Facebook groups where they posted their increasingly frantic requests for help. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, except the cars were people I'd once loved, and the crash had been entirely preventable. Derek had tried reaching out through intermediaries at first. My sister Claire had called me in early September, her voice carefully neutral. "Derek contacted me," she'd said. "He's asking if I'll talk to you about reconciliation." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I wasn't interested in being his messenger." "But Stella, are you sure about this? He sounds desperate." "Good," I'd said. "Desperate people make better choices than entitled people. He's still your son. He's a 30-year-old man who chose to steal from his mother rather than face adult responsibilities. Being my son doesn't give him a lifetime exemption from consequences." Claire had been quiet for a long moment. "You sound different. Harder." "I sound free." She hadn't called back. The federal court case had been delayed twice, but Derek's lawyer, a public defender now, since Patricia had stopped funding his legal defense, had warned him to expect significant penalties. The prosecution was pushing for restitution, community service, and probation, with jail time remaining a possibility if he couldn't demonstrate sincere remorse and lifestyle changes. But Derek had never been good at sincere remorse. Even his apologies were performances designed to manipulate rather than heal. I knew this because I'd received exactly one letter from him, forwarded through the post office from my old address. The letter was 12 pages of self-pity disguised as contrition. He was sorry I'd misunderstood his intentions. He was sorry that communication broke down between us. He was sorry that circumstances had led to such an unfortunate situation. Nowhere in those 12 pages did he write the words, "I was wrong to steal your passport." Nowhere did he acknowledge that treating me like unpaid staff had been cruel and dismissive. Nowhere did he take actual responsibility for the choices that had destroyed his life. Instead, he'd written about his childhood, about feeling abandoned after the divorce, about the pressure he felt to provide for Brianna. He'd written about my sudden personality change and wondered if I was going through something psychological that might explain my extreme reaction to what he still called a simple misunderstanding. The letter ended with a promise. If I would just give him another chance, if I would help him get back on his feet one last time, he would prove that he could be the son I deserved. I'd read it twice, then fed it into the shredder in my temporary office space. Now, 6 months later, sitting in Ireland with a cup of excellent coffee and a view of the countryside my grandmother had described in her stories, I felt nothing but a clean, clear satisfaction. Derek was experiencing the natural consequences of his choices, probably for the first time in his adult life. No one was rescuing him, enabling him, or cushioning his fall. My phone buzzed with a notification from the real estate app. The house had officially closed that morning. The new owners, a young couple with twin toddlers, would be moving in next week. They'd sent me a thank you card through Linda, expressing their excitement about the perfect family home and their plans to convert the garage apartment into a playroom. I'd made a profit of $367,000 on the sale. Combined with my savings and retirement accounts, I had enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life, without ever again having to consider someone else's needs above my own. The Ireland trip had been everything I'd dreamed and more. I'd traced my grandmother's footsteps through County Cork, visited the cottage where she was born, walked the cliffs she'd described in her letters. I'd spent 3 weeks in Dublin, a month in the countryside, and 2 weeks in Northern Ireland exploring landscapes that felt like coming home to a place I'd never been. But the real revelation hadn't been the beauty of the country or the satisfaction of completing a long-held dream. It had been the profound peace of living without the constant background anxiety of Derek's next crisis, Derek's next need, Derek's next assumption that my life existed to support his. For the first time in 30 years, I woke up each morning thinking about what I wanted to do, rather than what someone else needed me to do. I ate meals I enjoyed rather than meals designed to please others. I spent money on experiences that brought me joy rather than bailing out someone else's poor decisions. I'd discovered that I actually liked traveling alone, that I was good at navigating foreign countries and making decisions without consulting anyone else. I'd joined a genealogy research group in Dublin and made friends with people who shared my interests rather than my obligations. I'd taken watercolor classes, learned basic Irish Gaelic, and spent long afternoons reading books in pub gardens while rain drummed against the windows. Back home in Colorado, I'd purchased a small condo in a 55-plus community with excellent security and a strict no extended family policy. My neighbors were people who'd earned their independence, who understood the value of boundaries, who wouldn't enable someone else's adult children to treat them as free housing and unpaid domestic labor. I'd kept in touch with Linda, who'd become something of a friend during the house sale process. She'd told me that Derek had been seen in the old neighborhood several times, standing across the street from what used to be his home, watching the new family plant flower gardens where his entitlement used to bloom. He looked lost, Linda had said, like he couldn't quite believe it was real. Reality takes some getting used to, I'd replied. Now, finishing my coffee in Ireland and preparing to catch a train to my next destination, I thought about Derek's Facebook post one more time. The desperation in his eyes, the careful staging of their homelessness, the implicit demand that strangers fix problems he'd created for himself. He was still the same person who'd stolen my passport and dismissed my dreams. Still the same person who'd brought strangers into my bedroom to explain why my life didn't matter. Still the same person who'd expected me to sacrifice my happiness for his convenience. The only difference was that now he was experiencing the consequences of being that person. I closed my laptop, gathered my things, and walked outside into the Irish afternoon. Tomorrow, I'd take the train to Galway. Next week, maybe Cork. I had nowhere I needed to be, no one whose crises required my immediate attention, no obligations except to myself. For the first time in my adult life, I was exactly where I belonged, free, unburdened, and completely, utterly alone by choice. And Derek? Derek was learning that some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. Some mothers, once they stop enabling their children's selfishness, discover they never needed those children's chaos in their lives at all. The passport he'd stolen had been meant to take me to Ireland for 2 weeks. Instead, his theft had given me something far more valuable, a new life where I was nobody's backup plan, nobody's safety net, and nobody's unpaid servant. In the end, he'd been right about one thing. I was very good at taking care of things. I'd just finally learned to take care of myself instead of him, and I'd never been happier.